you've taken your original unit concept and expanded it and changed it. You're taking basically the same people and expanded and changed and improved their role. So yeah, that's an example of how that unit concept can grow. You know, your 5 newcomers with crossbows, couple of them will bring a couple more people along, and you end up being able to do more. So you've got 2 units of say 4 or whatever, and they can do 2 different things. One that can fire really fast, one that can put the shooting on. Right, so you again building your war, making your war work, and making your SCA army better. I don't mean your personal army, I mean like each army on either side. From year to year it'll grow and expand, and you've got to work at maintaining all of your goals. So Bruce's house still all wear the same colours that they started wearing. Right, except for Gareth, I think wears his own.
I mean, the actual picture on the front is different.
Yes,
essentially.
Exactly. So you've still got a unit feel there, even though they are essentially different households. Yes.
I just want to recap
So that's the unit concept. It starts as a recruiting device. It can grow into exploring all different avenues of SCA warfare. You know, once you get your 5 guys with crossbow and they decide they need some support, you get some shieldmen in. You know, guys want to be heavies, and you've got to train the shieldmen, whatever. You know, you can expand and detail your concept. Anything else?
We've already established that we should use the disciplines because it's super stupid when you're planning a war.
Yep.
What sort of things can you use on the basic, from your basic war scenario to try and make it more interesting, to try and make it sort of more interesting for the fighters who are participating, but not so complex and explain?
In my experience, largely the fighters, people overrate the fighters, or underrate the fighters' tolerance for these simple scenarios. Right? No, it's true. It's true. People go, we've got to make it more interesting in a straight field battle. Straight field battles are fun. Right? We line up there, they line up there, we go over and hit them. It's medieval warfare at its essence. Everybody likes them. Bridge battles are a lot of fun. You can mix them up. Anybody that was at the Total Larg last year, we did basically 4 field battles on one big bit of ground. And what we did was we worked 4 sides of this bit of ground. We fought this way to this way, this way to this way, this way to this way, and then this way to this way. Right? And that's only 4 field battles. They're plain, normal. We line up there, they line up there. Right? But because you change the ground you're fighting on, or even the angle that you're going at the ground, it makes it a completely different battle. There's that's right. You have to change your outlook. I mean, there's trees in one corner, fewer trees in another corner. So it's not so much coming up with a complex scenario as making it a little bit different. It doesn't have to be a lot different. It has to be just keep it fun, keep it interesting. So say you take the Romney side, fight one of the field battles, for instance, sideways. So everybody's got an uphill and downhill instead of one having downhill, one having uphill. Right? Just as an idea at the top of my head, take the bridge battle, and instead of fighting it from the top of the hills down to the middle of the bridge, start at the edge of the car park and the edge of the thing. So it's a meeting engagement between 2 forces trying to take a bridge. You know, this sort of thing. So you've got to change the rule. You don't need to come up with ridiculously complex scenarios, and it makes it easier to explain them if they're not ridiculously complex. Right, so yeah, you don't have to keep it simple again. You know, that's the key. Change a bit of ground. Find a bit of ground that looks interesting and go, why don't we fight between this bit and this bit? Because that's a nice tree there. Yeah. So terrain is a good point. Is a good factor to look at as well. And look at ground and say it'll make a nice place for people. Actually, just over there's a park and you get a toy there, which was. I mean, the bridge there is perfect. It's a perfect bridge for fighting SDA on. It's got nice solid rails. I know it's basically a two-man bridge. It's a perfect site for a little bridge battle. So picking a terrain is very important for designing a war scenario. Anything else?
What about inserting objectives?
I don't know. Inserting objectives and that sort of thing is unless it's a physical piece of reality, like a tree or a castle. Box of blocks.
I love that rock wall.
I love the rock wall. Rock wall, lots of fun, but
That's usually Star Wars and Christmas, right? We were after flags that were being placed.
no comment. Never like why didn't I like them? Okay, the initial concept was nice. It didn't work with the small number of people that were there. We had too few people trying to cover too much ground.
How would you have changed it to make it? I mean, if you were in control of it, okay, you were saying that it's your responsibility to make it fun for people. How would you have changed it?
I honestly don't know. Given that situation, given the numbers that are there, I honestly don't know. I probably would have done something along the lines of a total large idea of taking that large middle section, like the main camp section at Eric of the Romney site, and done a square, a four-way series of field battles in through that. See, with objectives.
Yeah, that's right. That's the correct side.
If you look at medieval battles, generally wasn't objective. The only sort of objective battles were really bridge battles, where both armies had to fight a bridge. Generally, the objective was the battle was to wipe out the other guy's army. So that's a field battle escape. Well, a siege would be lovely. I would give my eye teeth to be able to fight in a siege. Like a good one. Right? That's a whole new world of SCA warfare topic. Siege, it's huge. So we just
Not going there?
not at the moment. Maybe one day. Yeah, next year. So I don't know. I don't think I've been very coherent today. I've imparted some knowledge. I've been given the wind-up by the producer there. Is there one last question? Anybody? Leadership? That's another endless question. What is leadership and how do you do it? Right? You're better off asking them why they follow me. It's like, I'm not so much leading them as they're following me. Right? Why does Bruce's household follow me? Why does Raymond's household follow me?
Yeah, really.
Why does Alfar
It's easy to follow that. Oh. If I got lost, you could just press it. That is right.
Relatively even.
Yep.
There's no deep pits or rabbit holes that you find damaged in. What would you say would be the ideal size of unit and size of wall?
Big as you get. Big as
about the virtues of a knight, near the top of the list and certainly included would be chivalry. Who would leave chivalry off the list of knightly virtues?
Which night?
Overall, not necessarily a particular person, just saying that. Okay. The concept, right. Now in the great romantic literature of knights between the 10th and the 15th century, they would not have used the word in relation to knightly virtues at all. They would not have used it. To the medieval writing person, the good knight had many virtues and chivalry was not one of them. No, because chivalry is a concept, the way we use the word later, I'll go on to that. Over a period of time, the essence of the period virtues was blended together. And eventually we have the situation as it is understood today, that the word chivalry encompasses all of the virtues of the knight. To the stage where a chivalrous person means a knightly person. That's fine, but the problem with that is being a broad usage of the concept of chivalry, it's lost much of its detailed meaning. So what do we mean when we say someone is chivalrous? In period they didn't say that somebody was chivalrous, they used the various knightly virtues to say this person has that, this person has this person has that. Overall, they were chivalrous. But they didn't say chivalrous because they would have just used chivalrous. They didn't use chivalrous as a word, it wasn't used as a word. The word was chivalry. And chivalry was used in the context of, well look, here comes the chivalry. You know? People on horses with all the armour and the long pointy things. That's right. So, that was the usage. The use of chivalrous as a concept is gone. Okay. So much so that if we say that, as I said, are they good, loyal, trustworthy, brave, and so forth, like a Boy Scout?
What an appropriate ball for that statement.
In order to give some detail, I'm going to cover all the virtues of the knight as they were seen in the medieval period. In particular, I'm going to cover franchise and largesse, because they are virtues that are not well understood, and I feel they have a role in the society. Knightly virtues are, and I've got some of them written down here. Now, there are probably some others. This is just what I got from a couple of books. The first one is loyalty. Loyalty to your liege lord, loyalty to your peers, loyalty to others. Loyalty to your lady, loyalty to the people underneath you in your care. So it's not just loyalty up, it's loyalty sideways, it's loyalty down. Okay. Largesse, and I'm going to talk about largesse. Pity. Pity is not just pity in the way that we look at it now, it's sort of feeling sorry for somebody. We're talking about compassion, mercy, understanding. A broad usage of the word. Franchise. I'm going to cover franchise. Courtesy. Courtesy and courtly graces, especially towards women. Prowess. A high level of competency with all the essential fighting skills, including horsemanship. So it's not just prowess in a weapon, prowess in all weapons, and on horsemanship. So if you're looking at somebody who had all of these things, you would say they had all the knightly virtues. What do you think was the most important of those virtues to the medieval person?
Sit on a horse.
Oh, wait a second, I didn't actually explain it. I'll go back to what largesse is. I'll sort of basic thing on largesse. Largesse is like generosity. Right? And franchise is like a bit like self-confidence, an air of nobility. Right? A person who is content within themselves at their social status and their abilities and doesn't really need the approval of others. Right? A person who displays franchise feels that way. Right? So, of those, who do you think in medieval periods they looked at as the most important?
Largesse.
Well, it's a stupid
Which
question.
medieval period? Which country?
War, right?
Which person?
From the things that I've been reading, this is in Chaucer. Chaucer thought that the most important was largesse. And the reason he thought it was most important was because in period, people weren't paid. People received their rewards from their lord whole heap of armour, and flogged it, and had lots of money. So you get lots of pay. Other times, hadn't done so well. Run up against the coroner, you get trashed all the time. So it's tightening the belts, you've given all your armour away, coroner's got it, right? So you need some more, you've got to get it off the peasants. Franchise was regarded as the second most important, because if a person didn't display nobleness of spirit, they couldn't command respect. They couldn't command respect, they wouldn't give them. Right? So, franchise and largesse were the two biggies. Now, at this stage I can give you all a copy of this. I was going to ask you little questions, you see, as I went along. Not just greedy, person who was avaricious, wanted everything. Generosity, I could say, is similar to greedy. Largesse is the opposite of avaricious. A person who displays largesse is not just generous in terms of monetary things, but is generous with their time, is generous with other aspects. As I said, in medieval times, most supporters had no pay. They included such useful people as minstrels, heralds, armourers, squires, and any other sort of person depending on the knight for financial support. There's no virtue without a high. There are a number of minstrels wrote scathing period pieces about their bosses who didn't pay them. One example of this style of thing, which isn't actually about largesse, but is about another SCA vice, is the song The Man Who Would Not Die. Anybody familiar with the song? The Man That Would Not Die is based on a true person. And this is a person who basically took extremely heavy blows to the stage where people deliberately made swords that were heavily weighted in an attempt to dent his 12-gauge leg armour, 12-gauge helmet. The end of the story is where a bunch of people gang together, lure him under a cliff, and roll a boulder down on him, which crushes him to the ground. And a hand waves out and goes, "Light, my lord!" So, that's a scathing thing. They used to do that to people who didn't show largesse. So people comes up with the concept of what largesse is as a word. Not actually what you do with it, but as a word, it's sort of like a very strong form of generosity. Franchise is a harder word, also defined in the dictionary. It uses freedom, immunity, privilege as means to explain franchise. These words are not very similar. Not like, say, liberality, bountifulness, beneficence. They explain largesse fairly well. But freedom, immunity, and privilege don't have a lot in common. Which goes to show that the word franchise is a complex word, with a complex meaning. And what the bigger definition lower down in bold is the mark of the well-bred, a certain freedom of naturalness in manner and form of approach. Again, it's useful to look at the opposites. The opposites of franchise would be a person who would be servile. You would have people in literature, and one of the famous people is Uriah Heep, a very humble and servile person. He was actually a very nasty character who only pretended to be servile, but that sort of self-effacing person, a person who would command very little respect. Now, the person with franchise commands respect, is honourable, speaks his own mind, generally self-assured and confident. There's a little example there, which I read in one of the things, about the Black Prince. The Black Prince has just taken the city of Castile, and rather than ride triumphantly in on a large horse with all the banners going and everything else, he walks in on foot in front of his own wife and child. Each hand. He doesn't need the pomp and the ceremony. He knows what he's done. He's had quite a long siege, I think about 6 months or so. He's taken one of the largest cities in Spain. He doesn't need any kudos. So,
Thing under your large
now,
bag.
I thought I'd start this off with two examples of one each thing, right? Now, admittedly, this is a bit of a blow your own trumpet stuff, but basically you can talk about yourself without doing that. For the fighter auction tourney, I have always donated something that I feel is of reasonable worth. The very first fighter auction tourney, I had built a large black chest, about 4 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. And I donated that to the fighter auction tourney, so that was the first big prize for the fighter auction tourney. And it was sent to the board. So that's that sort of thing. But also, I think a very important thing in the society is the amount of time people put into the society. Time is not something they would have regarded in medieval times as being a sign of largesse, because time wasn't valued in the same way it is nowadays. But people who put in time to help armour people, train people, take them from one place to the other, give them lifts home, they're all displaying largesse. It's their time, giving it to people. They don't usually charge for it, it's free. They might recoup their expenses. That's largesse. Very powerful form of largesse. But what I was answering there is things that we could do in the tournament. One of the most powerful ways they used the largesse in tournament times was for the rewarding of heralds and minstrels. Now, one of the cunning ways they used largesse was to pay a herald, because heralds are more like a minstrel, they actually say anything. They were usually hangers around. They weren't what we would have as heralds. They were what you might recall itinerant bards, I suppose, or itinerant speakers. They used to go around saying wonderful things about knights and about the people who were fighting, in the hope that they would get paid money. You know, like...
Professional sick fund.
That's what a professional sick fund. Now, one of the ways we could do this in the society, not necessarily with the payment of money, would be to get a herald or someone else, a hangers-on, to say wonderful things about your opponent. About the tournaments he's won, how he's been, prince twice or 3 times, trashes everybody. Now, that's fine. It's very period to have somebody going on to the virtues. They're blowing someone else's trumpet, right? And it's got some good points too. You don't get them to blow your own, you get them to blow your opponents. Then, if you win, great! You just said how wonderful he is. Let people go and tell the whole populace how wonderful he is, right? And you've beaten him. So, wonderful. If you lose, well, you've got a ready excuse. Already just told everybody how shit on he is. So that's a couple of things that we can do with largesse, with a tournament.
My child is very reasonable.
So has anyone else got some other ideas that we could write down that we could do in relation to largesse tournaments? Now, if you have little kids, your kids are a reasonable age, you can just give them a drink, you can give them a gold coin, if you okay for kids paying kids things, because kids are very happy with that sort of thing. But with another person, you've got to have some act of generosity. And that would add to the pageantry. Oh, and then there's franchise. Franchise is a bit trickier. A personal thing for franchise, for me, is not necessarily a tournament thing. I know Ragnar likes units. He likes units to be all dressed up and look the same, and I never get dressed up that way. I always wear my stuff. That's me. If somebody particularly important asked me to join a unit, I'd join that unit. And if they wanted to put a baldric or something on me, I'd go have a baldric. I wouldn't wear their colours. My colours, I'm entitled to wear my colours. I don't have to wear anyone else's. So,
Have to be one.
yes?
Would you, as Baron of Rowley, wear the baronial
had, say, a baronial army with it? Like if you had, like, if you could put all your baronial guards in baronial colours, would you wear the Baron's tabard?
Well, personally, I would never put the baronial stuff into baronial tabards because I feel that barons weren't allowed to do that. They weren't.
Oh,
That's an army.
yes.
No.
How did the Wars of the Roses happen?
Only barons. Most of the period, most of the barons were not allowed to have personal livery for the troops, except if you were in a border area.
It's not personal livery.
Only the
baronial
king
livery.
could confer personal livery. He could put his troops in his colours. No one else was allowed to do so.
But that of course depends on the country.
People stick them in a list, have them all trash it out, and it got very confusing. So colours started to be used for those because you have team one small area, it's very messy. Right, that's a personal thing. That's just a personal. Two of which are a bit unusual, especially franchise. But they're an essential part of a medieval knight was that level of self-confidence. I think that most fighters would aspire to being a knight, and then you've got to pick up those aspects. And you're looking at chivalry as an overall, and it's made up of these. So you look at your loyalty, you look at your compassion, your pity, you look at your self-respect, the way in which you generate respect in others for yourself, the way in which you feel about yourself, right? And the other knightly virtues that we have there, like courtesy. Most of them are fairly simple, some of them are worth thinking about. So I'd like the people who occasionally feel that they are fairly small, that they're not particularly important, that other people make decisions for them. Look, I'm a medieval lord. Everybody in the society is a medieval lord. Medieval lords don't take shit from commoners, right? They're important. Everybody in the society is important. Everybody deserves to be treated with respect. And you've got to make that upon yourself. Say, I am a decent person, I deserve respect, I've got to do things that make people respect me. And then you'll generate franchise. Okay.
You've got the order, that's what I saw. You've got the order, and then you've got the suffrage on the old man. That's and was one of the most universal stuff I could probably wrote. But it was a much more encompassing franchise.
Just have to teach yourself. See, that's why we shouldn't do it to them, because we're breaking it.
And looking at the question, it seemed to be a very big topic to cover. And I've received a number of books. Can't say I've read all the books, but I went through some of them to work out how I could possibly talk about chivalry. And I came to the conclusion that I could write probably 100,000 word thesis on it. Well, maybe that idea. The idea that I like to do, what I like to do, is briefly just explain to you what the impression I had about how they saw chivalry, So what is chivalry? It's an interesting question. According to a book that I was reading by Malcolm Vale called War and Chivalry, the ideal of chivalry consists of honour, loyalty, courage, generosity, and these things have fulfilled a fundamental human need, felt especially among warrior elites whose social function has been to fight. So it fits in, I suppose, for the stick jocks of the world. That's how it comes in context to us, or so it seems. Those ideals that I spoke about in the Middle Ages, and I would think in the SEA world as well, they're tested out constantly, every day, be it in war and tourney and so forth. And that's why they're just ideals. And I suppose this is where we've got to be true to the ideals as much as possible. According to another source, chivalry is seen as a means whereby limiting rules were imposed on later medieval warfare. It permitted and justified the exercise of violence in the prosecution and avenging of essentially private quarrels. Such views could lead to wars between both nobles and sovereign princes. So obviously it's not a necessarily pretty picture of what chivalry was back even in the Middle Ages. But, as I said, because I'm covering this period, there are also some few other things about chivalry, and that was chivalry was not only an ethic, but it was a code of behaviour and institution. It was a collective dream. And if you know about the dream we have in the SCA, we have it, and from my reading, they also have this dream of chivalry. So the point there, I suppose, is, I don't know, if you could ever say someone is completely chivalrous, what you might be able to say is that someone is very good at being chivalrous, leaving things on time. As part of this collective dream, literature in the 15th century was used as a tool to enhance chivalry in its own time. And what I mean by that is that when you want to train someone, like part of their education of a nobleman, you encourage them to read such chronicles about the Carolingian heroes or the Arthurian tales, so they might be inspired by that. And might also include the ancient Roman texts, because in that, though they didn't quite have the idea of chivalry, they did enhance things about honour, they did talk about discipline, which is part of it all, and other virtues. In a book called The Introduction to a Young Prince, which I've been told means the introduction to a young prince, or for a young prince, there was no doubt to the relationship between the supreme chivalrous qualities of honour and virtue. Without virtue, honour was unattainable. To be honoured, a nobleman's conduct should always be virtuous. So you just can't be a knight, for example. Let me finish. A knight can't simply claim to be part of chivalry, but he must also be virtuous to be really part of that chivalry. Yep.
What does virtuous mean?
Virtues, I suppose. It wasn't in my brief to cover, you see. I'll draw the question back to you. Bruce, what do you think it means?
No, come on.
I would say, to be honest, I think back then respect the Lord, respect women. It's just to name a few. I couldn't name all of them. No claim to, never could. That's part of it. In England and Burgundy, literature was a popular method to define a noble's role in both war and peace. So it's not just simply on and off the field for us. Well, I should say it's not just simply being on the field, it's also being off the field that counts. Literate nobility was thought to be of the persuasion. Literate nobility was thought to be persuaded. What they read was therefore designed to determine what they did. As I said, as part of their education. And picked up this part here from a person called Gilbert de Lomain. He was a noble by birth in the castle of Philip the Good. And he wrote a letter to his son, telling his son on how he should be educated, how he should behave. This is dated 1440. You should know that one should do nothing against honour for life, death, or money. Furthermore, truly believe that it is better to die honourably than to live censored and dishonoured in this mortal world. As for myself, my very dear son, I would prefer you to die gloriously in an honourable battle with banner unfurled than to return cravenly from it. Read Valerius Maximus, Tullius, Lucian, Oresius, Sallust, Justin, and other histories. You'll find marvellous, honourable, and immeasurable examples of how our predecessors loved honour and public weal, how they exposed themselves to death for the good of land, and also of how they preserved their reputation within the discipline of chivalry, and did not fear to put their own children to death when they sinned against the laws. So, if we were to look at chivalry, and as I said, I could write lots about it, talk about it for a long time. What I would encourage everyone to do is simply read a lot, be they of the ancient texts, be they of the medieval texts, and maybe some other secondary sources, just to give you an idea. Personally, I read books like Tolkien, because Tolkien gets his ideas from further back, if you prefer just reading the fantasy literature and other fantasy literature. Llewyn, Arthur, I found particularly inspiring. Heavy to read, but inspiring. So, really, the question for us is then, what is the role of chivalry in the SCA? And should it be, and I was going to say, it must also extend itself on and off the field, which I've already done. This is where I'm asking you to put your contribution in. Does chivalry apply to everyone in the SCA? And does that also mean non-fighters when I say the word chivalry? Yeah?
Well, if that's displaying virtues like loyalty and honour and courtesy, definitely. It's what we are all about.
Okay. Someone made a point to me that the knights are part of chivalry, but if I got this right, the laurels and the pelicans are based on their courtesy. Courtesy. Is there a difference between the two?
Well, if you look back to Torg's earlier discourse on it, chivalry is the all-encompassing attribute to virtues of honour, largesse, franchise, humility, loyalty, to name five.
It's also, I think, come from a warrior concept which has grown beyond that initial restrictive view.
Chivalry comes from the French word chevalier, which means mounted warrior. So it comes from, being the biggest pug on the block.
Richest pug on the block.
Yeah.
That's why, depending on the people, that's why, yeah.
Actually, throwing my 2 cents worth, I think the concept of chivalry that we use within the SCA is actually slightly different from the concepts of chivalry elsewhere. For the simple reason that we have created, if you will, our own creative idea of what chivalry is. And for us, chivalry is based along the lines of Arthur and Knights of the Round and that concept, rather than any total idea of what really happened.
It's going to be like a romanticised idea.
It's a romanticised idea, of course.
The coronet I fought in came second, previous to the one that I won last. The Prince at the time saw fit to give me the wreath of chivalry. Now, as Prince, I fought in a tournament in Adelaide, and the winner of the tournament was chosen by everyone would line up with their helmet on the ground so people could match people's helmets. And then everyone was given a token, and I would put a token in the helmet of the person who they thought was the most chivalrous. Now I won that tournament, and I'm quite confident I did not take any blows. I didn't take unfair advantage of anyone. And I got one token, and the person that won got about 15, and the average was about 6 or 7. So a Prince here thought that yes, I was chivalrous. By popular acclaim, I'm not. Which I'm not sort of disagreeing with necessarily either.
It's not possibly saying to teach it. As people join the SCA, they are taught what is happening and what is chivalric behaviour. That is part of the training of being a fighter. You are told it is chivalric to do this, it is honourable to take these blows. We don't have an umpire because we rely on your honour, and therefore we are imposing a value, and you can accept it or reject it.
I think that's right. I think it's a good thing to talk about this because we now can get a feeling of what everybody else considers us to be. Being a peer, you can work towards your own dreams and your own goals, and you have to fit with your own ideas of what chivalry are and try and work with your own ideas of chivalry. But it's not just you that made you the who you are. It's the people around you who fought you if they're a knight. It's the people around you who saw you doing service if you're a paladin. It's the people around you whose pleasure of SEO were increased by your skills and in the arts and sciences. Those people are what made you what you are, not just yourself. And so I as a paladin can't just say, well, my idea of chivalry is this, and therefore I don't have to worry about what anybody else thinks. The more I hear from the people around me, the more I know what those people. I mean, I don't necessarily feel I have to do everything that everybody says I should, or be everything that everybody says I should, but I do feel that at least I should know what is expected of me and my part of my behaviour. It's part of the socialisation process is to know what other people consider to be ideal, what other people consider to be chivalry. So that when I go on the field as a new fighter, I don't do things that other people would consider to be unchivalric, even though I thought they were. The only way I'm going to find out is to talk.
I think one of the important things of this discussion is not just trying to define what chivalry is, but it's to help people explore what they're when someone goes down the knees for me. Okay? And I respect their right to do so, but it's like, okay, it frustrates me because now, if I should win, it's not because of my own ability to do so to speak. It's like, well, they've given up an advantage to allow me to do so. It's like, I find it a little bit frustrating, but for them, it's just a very gesture, and I appreciate that, and that's fine. You know, so it's just like everyone has a slightly different view of the same thing to make it right or wrong.
Which that example is an interesting
Morgan
one.
put his hand up.
No, it's unchivalrous to go to your knees after you've legged a person because you have been insulting them. You've gone, well, I may have had that advantage, which I have won by right of arms. It is something you have achieved. And yielding your advantage to them says, I do not need this advantage. Why I hit you there in the first place is inconsequential. I could have killed you anyway. It is an insult to your opponent.
Yeah, it's part of chivalry.
There you go.
That's why because I
I think that you should treat everybody the same. You shouldn't sort of go down, well, this fighter isn't quite as good as me, I'll go down on my knees to them. This is Jade, no way am I going down. You should do the exact same thing to everybody. And I don't really see it as being chivalric or unchivalric whether you go down or not, okay? Personal choice. But I think you should do the same.
Throwing away a fairly won advantage is insulting to your opponent. I don't do it anymore. Maybe it's because I'm old and slow. Maybe it's because I've taken one arm off of Florentina and very generously put my shield behind my back and been clubbed. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting thing.
But see, I mean, that was funny because I started exactly the same time while I was in the SCA, and I had a completely different view, and I was playing Alfar actually, because I mean, one of the people trainers to begin with, and he drummed into us to do that, and it's taken me years to get over that habit. I mean, but you were trained by the same person, you learned that view.
It's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
I think it boils down to, as I said before, everyone has their own opinion, their own interpretation of chivalry. And I think it's just a good display, or example, I should say, that that's the case. Alright, let's move on to the next point. We've been talking about that for quite a while. Something towards the crowd again. So which virtue in chivalry would you consider the most important? Be it honour, valour, loyalty, courage, generosity, courtesy?
Is this in the SCA context or is it in a medieval?
In the SCA.
Okay.
Courtesy.
Courtesy?
None of the above. They're all equal.
In fact, I'd even challenge that and say all of those virtues are possessed by the honourable man.
Of course.
So there's only one man, really.
Not necessarily. I mean, there's arguments back and forth, but
Just repeat your answer again.
none of the above. They're all equal.
What are all equal?
All the virtues.
Good.
They should all be equal.
Good.
That's why you have the 7 deadly sins and 7 virtues.
I remember that.
But does that mean to be chivalrous, a person has to show all the virtues and equal values to lesser degree, still be regarded as chivalrous?
It depends on the individual again, doesn't it? It's a very individual thing. You don't have to be rich to swear by it.
It could also be time.
I was going to go through what each of those meant, and I will do so very briefly. Okay. What do we think honour is? What is honour? Indefinable. What do we call it then?
We all have our personal
Well, you couldn't define it, so how would we know what we're doing in terms of honour?
Doing the right thing.
Being true to your own ideals.
Sense of right, being true to your own ideals. Any other?
Morality.
Morality.
Doing the right thing by what your own ideals are. It's like, okay, I don't think I am immoral by not going to my knees. Chuck might say, well, that's bad. You shouldn't go to your knees with the person you've just left. And it's like, it's that you've got to hedge your bets, the balance.
Take it out of the defining context.
Okay.
To follow society's ideals is honourable,
That's right, some
rather than just following your own ideals. To follow the greater ideals of society. Like, my ideals might be fine. It's okay for me to kill 1 in 10 in this room, but society says no, it's not.
I would see. We're talking about. I think one of the parts of honour is someone with the ability to kill 1 in 10 people in this room and chooses not to because society says.
Well, you know.
You can't.
You're just going off the track.
Well, no, it's like
Stop moving them right.
Hang on, the camera person. Yep.
Does the camera person get a put in? I think honour's got more to do with, less to do with your own social ethics and more to do with your own personal integrity.
Your own, sorry?
Personal integrity. That's all.
I was going to simply put in my bit that it's really, I suppose someone said being nice to another person and not causing them any harm, really. You're not doing that. Maybe helping them where it's appropriate. That seems to be my general interpretation of honour. It's hard to define, but everyone's different. Yep, you were going to say?
Well, it was very interesting. Some time ago, I ran headlong into the Baron of Riverhaven with a point of honour. He thought he was being honourable. I thought I was being honourable, but completely on a different track. But we were both striving for honour. We ran headlong into each other. We both appreciated we were trying to be honourable, but it utterly disagreed. It completely disagreed. And it was very interesting because it really drove home to me that honour is something that we constantly strive for. We can never reach it. We can never reach it. None of us are perfect. We will never be honourable. But the trick is constantly striving for it. And the whole virtues thing lines into that is knowing that you are not right, but you're trying to find what is right.
You can never be completely honourable.
No,
Trying is worthwhile.
that's right. Trying is worthwhile.
The important fact is you're trying. It's not actually being honourable, but you're trying to be honourable. That's the important thing. Or you're trying to be chivalrous.
Alright, next one. Valor. What do we consider valor? Ragnar.
Well, no, thank you very much. I'm glad to be defined the definition of valour. Valour. The desperate battle against impossible odds.
Or bravery.
Yeah,
Multiple
so.
odds. Okay, would anyone else like to think, to expand on that or accept that?
Whether you choose the more difficult option because you believe it to be right.
More difficult option because I believe it's right. Can you give me an example?
Choosing the dark side is The dark side is easy, quick.
They might be right.
I thought you chose the more difficult option because it was the more difficult.
Well, that to me is a more thing of valorous, or like charging 75,000 people by one, or.
That's why you
I think it's just giving it your best shot.
Giving it your best shot.
I think it's linked to honour in that it's doing whatever you do with honour, right? I mean, you can give it your best shot and still not be valorous, I feel like it's like facing someone in a tournament and you have the option to give them, when they turn around and pick up their sword, to whack them in the back of their head, right? But you choose to instead face them in combat and we have your own strength of
making your best honourable attempt at prowess.
It's prowess, but it's prowess with honour.
What's the difference between, say, valorous and courage?
Sorry.
What is the difference between being valorous and being courageous? Nothing.
Oh, I was going to get to that. Just give me a bit of time.
There's no C in Bella.
Spelling and pronunciation, okay.
Two more people and then should move on.
I think Bella also holds something in displaying your bravery and so forth. Actually putting on a display of bravery to those around you.
Morgan?
I'd say it's the will to keep going even over and above your physical or mental feelings. Like you might be tired, you might be stressed out, you might feel like you can't go on, and then just having the will to go over that. So I suppose Valor has an element of willpower involved in it.
Okay, next one. Loyalty.
Yes, Your Honour.
Loyalty in which direction? To those that you are subordinate to, or to your subordinates?
We'll ask the squires. Quiet squire. Chuck.
Yes.
John. Well,
Loyalty. I guess to do well. I don't know.
Build country.
Follow my lead. To sit in the background and be quiet.
A bit more than that. Boris.
To do to the standards that people believe you should.
To standards that people should.
Yeah, if people believe you should do things to their standards, well, you do because you respect what they tell you.
Society in that sense, really?
Basically, it's anything. If people expect you to do something a certain way and you do it, well, you're basically being loyal to what they want.
Okay.
Inspired voluntary obedience.
Voluntary obedience.
Inspired.
I was going to say that.
It's kind of like having priorities.
Oh, sorry.
It's kind of like having priorities in order. It's, first of all, my first loyalty would be to Sir Damon as head of the household. Next, my next loyalty is to the household itself. And anything outside of that, you sort of prioritise as it comes.
Fair enough.
But first of all, you
I'll
follow.
have a question for you in a moment about that.
It's to put your commitments to other people above your own interests.
Oh, lady, hang on, look. We'll turn you.
I think loyalty is more to protect and serve the household and all its allies and its members.
Let's take an example, Night Squire, because that seems to be a pretty typical case. Does loyalty go beyond the SCA?
No.
Yes, it is.
Of course it does. Would depend upon.
Especially in household
It would
where
depend,
everyone's
on
friends
the
anyway.
relationship between the knight and squire. If the knight and squire are only if they only see each other in the society, no, of course it doesn't. But if they are, say, friends outside, given that loyalty is not a one-way interaction, interaction, it's a two-way interaction, of course it would.
Okay. What about?
Well,
Okay, one more.
there too. If you're in the outside mundane world and then there's say context comes up, like somebody starts banging at your night sort of thing, and you know, then the loyalty will then come up there as well to
Defend. Yeah.
to defend them, or at least to speak the truth sort of thing. So let's extend out the
Two or three more people. Corin?
Loyalty, certainly in medieval context, generally was you sort of obedience and thoughtful obedience and preemptive obedience. It's sort of more doing what your Lord would expect of you before being told, so it wasn't just obedience. But I think loyalty in the SCA has to be watered down because back then it was far more important. Your Lord was your livelihood, your life depended upon him. It's not like that in society, and I think the loyalty between, say, knight and squire, at least the way I view it, is no different from the loyalty between two people that are just friends anywhere else. Certainly, relationship with my squires, I mean, I'm not their lord by any stretch of the imagination, and if I were to suggest such a thing, they'd laugh at me. Rather rigorously. So I think it's more loyalty between people is just loyalty between friends, and then there are loyalties to such ideals as it's a party that we're all attending, and you don't want to spoil anyone else's party. So it's sort of more, it's a social group, it's not sort of that real life sort of thing.
All right. I think there was Torg. Okay, Torg.
I agree with a lot about the voluntary, but it's a voluntary bit with obligations. There's a pressure there. It's not just purely will I or won't I, how do I feel about it? It's a will I or won't I with obligations, right? Which lead you in one direction, right? And I can't see loyalty as being just like layers of an onion. There's loyalty to a person, and the next most important person is loyalty to that person, and there's loyalty to the other person. You can't say that they're mutually exclusive. You can only say that your loyalty is to the person you should have loyalty to in respect of your obligations for that person in that context. So, for example, loyalty to a household is fine, but it wouldn't override loyalty to the kingdom at any time, right?
Well,
And from a personal point of view, I don't think loyalty to a household should override loyalty to a parent. That's my opinion. Okay, that's all right. I mean, I agree. Disagree with you.
It's also being loyal to yourself, and for me that might be different.
That's true.
I might feel it's more important to be loyal to the household than to Barony first.
Baronies don't generally require loyalty. They don't seek it. They don't go to their fighters and say you are to be loyal to the barony. It's not something the FCA does. In medieval times, it would have been very much so. I mean,
when you wouldn't be one of the Baron's fighters if you weren't that loyal.
Fought for that barony, if they wanted to go and fight for the town next door, it was probably a sort of off with the head type.
Certainly so.
From my point of view, loyalty has to be within the context. So loyalty to win a household should only be in relation to those things that households are important for. It shouldn't go beyond those things that a household does. It shouldn't go beyond the things that SCA does up in the whole.
Alright. Valerian, you going to finish it up?
Yeah, actually been a little trouble getting it straight in my mind, so perhaps you can help me along as I go.
Val.
I was going to say, with loyalty in that, if you look at one sort of advice to his son, and he says, this above all, thine own self be true. So your first loyalty is to yourself, then to your family, then to your king,
moving.
Someone else cannot supersede, I suppose, your own internal belief structure. So that if Alfar, as my prince were to say, go and kick that small child, I'm your prince. And I was
But there will be instances where things like that can override.
And I said, oh, I have a problem with that. I said, no, I love you. And I chose to do that.
Because I'm paying franchise.
I don't think that I'm being disloyal.
But there must be occasions where things like that override. Let's say, for argument's sake, Alfar knows that by kicking that child, you're going to save its life.
I go, alright.
You can never always be 100% loyal to yourself.
There are extremes to me. I don't like that child, go and kick him, alright?
That's definitely not either. But I mean, that was just the example you used, but I mean, you can't always be 100% loyal to yourself.
In medieval loyalty, you of course would go and kick that small child because you're prince.
No, you wouldn't. I think the argument's getting, all the debate, sorry, is getting just real carried away. Yeah, that's not bad.
I'll leave you. Oh, thank you very much.
Your Highness, are you going to touch on guilty? Because
It's going to
I
cost
always
you.
thought something.
It's got two more to go. The next one is courage that I want to look at. Someone said that courage isn't any different to
I did.
valor.
No, I said, what is the difference?
What is the difference? Can anyone think of any particular difference? What there might be a particular difference?
I've got probably a quote that probably sums up better. Okay? A man who rushes blindly in, regardless of the danger, is a fool. A man who goes in with the knowledge and then goes in anyway is courageous. Basically, a person who goes blindly in there.
Can you say that again?
Someone who rushes blindly in is a fool. Okay, they're not courageous, they're being foolish. Someone who takes note of what the dangers are and then goes in is courageous.
But which one of them is being valiant?
Well, the fool.
Generally, just from the usage that I've seen of the word valour and courageous, only definition to say, people who go off and face the dragon single-handedly to save the maiden and die are courageous. The ones that actually kill the dragon are the ones that are valorous. And the usage I've seen, the people that are valiant or valorous are the ones that have the skill to back up their courage.
They have prowess.
Yeah, they have prowess and courage, whereas if you have no prowess and just courage, then you die. We're a fool. We're all cowards.
Seems like a very good explanation.
Yeah. I was thinking, also valor, I think, is also inspirational courage. It's like courage with leadership that inspires others to follow your example and punch headlong into danger for a cause or whatever.
Take the girls with you.
Yeah. With you, lots of company.
Courage can be a very, very personal thing. Courage can be you're faced with a sickness that may kill you. It's something you're afraid of, and that can kill you, and you may die of. Courage is turning around and saying, I will not, and fighting it. That is not valour, because you have no skill in that. That is courage. Courage is facing something that you are very, very afraid of. Still turning around and going, I'm afraid of this, and knowing that you're afraid, and accepting that you're afraid, and doing it anyway. Courage can be standing up there.
We'll not get back into this one. Okay, filthy. This one can go right, so one can keep it short. What is filthy? Bruce?
Are you giving Bruce's definition of guilty?
No.
I actually think that's quite good. Guilty is actually promising loyalty. Okay? You're literally promising loyalty above everything else. Guilty, you swear. And it's your word that you will do basically whatever you've promised. And that's guilty. I mean, you don't have to be loyal. You don't have to want to do it, okay? But you have to do it because you promised. And that's the difference between knights and the other orders. Knights must swear fealty. They have no choice. The other orders may choose to swear fealty. They have a choice.
But once been sworn fealty.
But you swear to each individual king, okay?
No,
You choose
the king crown.
to swear to each individual king as they come up. You It's a choice you make. You didn't have to make that choice.
Swearing to the
But
crown,
once I
not the
made that
person
choice, I only made
underneath
that
you.
choice once. I don't get to make it again. I don't get to change my mind.
Kieran, it will only make a difference if they change the ceremony. If they change the ceremony and made it a requirement, then you'd be correct. Until they change the ceremony and make it a requirement, Bruce is correct.
Bruce is correct. I'm not saying that it's not a requirement for the knights to swear fealty. And I'm not saying that it is a requirement for the other orders. What I'm saying is that once one of the orders, this is my opinion, right, personally, once one of those people who, upon taking on their order, swears fealty, at that time, they have sworn the same fealty as a knight, and it is a permanent fealty, and I am required to swear fealty to every king and queen that steps up on that throne, because I have sworn fealty to them, just as the knights do. You may say, that's your, you can say that, but that's not how I feel.
Talk.
That's no way I feel.
She's taken it to a more personal level.
Okay.
That's what she's done. On paper, it's not necessarily the case, but on a personal, deep personal level, that's how she believes.
You say she's sworn fealty to the crown rather than to the king and queen.
Which means anyone, whoever's king and queen, she has loyalty to that person. Or person.
Anyway, back to my definition of fealty, okay? Whether I agree or disagree with what the Crown decides, I must support them, okay? I have sworn fealty and must support them.
Do you not see... Sorry.
Something Valga wrote in my book was, he wrote an article on fealty, and one thing he said was, fealty is, if the king is being a dick, telling the king that he is being a dick, and then standing by him and all this. That's right. That's word for word. That's right. Yeah, it's two words.
Yeah, I mean, I guess sort of how far you take your fealty is another matter. I mean, if some king or prince were to ask me to do something that I thought was completely stupid, then I feel, even though I sworn fealty, quite in my right to say that's completely stupid and not do it. I've sworn to support the crown, but I haven't sworn to obedience at all. So I certainly support the crown, but support doesn't necessarily mean doing everything that you're told.
That's true. You don't have to do it to support to be not doing it.
If he told you to roll at a convenience store, you wouldn't do that.
But in that case, your mundane recognition of the law is overriding your fealty.
If you told me to go out and roll in the mud, I'd go out and roll in the mud.
Yeah, that's because you're
But you don't see.
But you wouldn't smell it. You wouldn't smell it.
It says that before or after his crown?
We've had this, I remember this question years back. I know a good answer, but Bruce definitely remembers this answer too.
Alright, literally you do everything in your power before they became crown to stop it, okay? I'd appeal to the crown that was sitting at the time before the coronation started, okay? Everything in my power to stop it. If it actually went ahead, I mean, I may not like it, but I'm not swearing to the person. I'm swearing to the crown. So yes, I'd have to go and swear fealty to the crown.
I've heard him might say that, but yeah, it's a sticky one.
Again, you're swearing fealty to the office. Swearing fealty to the office, not to the person.
That's right. This person that's about to put the crown on their head is not honouring it, and you have fealty to that crown.
Just
right?
you wait
me master if you do so wish, but if you do not wish to do so, think of me as no one more than a lord. My subject is entertainment as a courtly skill. We have discussed today, I told everybody, I told you not, I'd be moving around a lot. My discussion today is entertainment as a courtly skill. Today we have discussed what many things are. We have discussed what chivalry is, what virtue is, what these many things that we define as chivalry, as knight, but in many ways we haven't discussed why you should do these things. Entertainment is one facet of the courtly graces. This does not apply merely to knights, it applies to all the peerages. And, taken a step further, it applies to all persons that wish to carry themselves in court. The reason is this, for those specifically in power, knights more so, but I will use myself as an example first. I am Master Llewyn the Unruly. I am peer within the society. I am recognised throughout the known world as a peer. I wield some power. If I wield that power badly, then I am a disgrace to the order that I represent. But how do you know that I have a side other than that power? How do you know that I have virtues? One of the ways I display those virtues is through the gentle arts, the courtly graces. That if I am gentle enough to sing, or to read poetry, or to tell a tale, or to act in a play, it shows that I am more than just a thug. And that grows from, to a large degree, within the early medieval period, where knights, before they became knights, were nothing more than armed warriors that went about conquering, killing, destroying. But they reached a point, as did all of Europe, that they started to relearn civilization. And as such, those in power wished to see themselves as better than others who were in power, that more than just thugs. And those thugs started to gather about them people of ability. And they started to, you could say, in a form of largesse, to give to those who had the civilized arts. This, in a lot of ways, was brought about due to reflection on the old Roman Empire. They wanted to be what the old Roman Empire was. So once there was some stability within Europe, they tried to gather about themselves what looked to them to be civilization. Now that had changed from the old look, but they gathered about themselves people of skill. They then started to look at themselves as possibly skilled, as people of grace, of gentle arts. Now, as far as where we get the modern concepts of what is the courtly graces, especially what is chivalry, right? What defines the knightly class, comes to a large degree in the 11th, 12th, and 13th century. We have in southern France, we have the Trouvères. Okay, and they grew up out of what had become a highly civilized area within that period of time. And they started to build very beautiful things, gather about them art, and especially in the areas of entertainment. They would basically gather about themselves people of music, of learned books. They would gather many things like that. And so we grew up with the Trouvères. Now the Trouvères existed in, there's quite a good SCA book called Easy Troubadours, sorry. It's one on the Trouvères. It's a very simple book to get on the SCA. It's one of the complete anachronists. And it tells you basically of the beginnings of that style. So, and here we have the interesting thing of what chicken or egg. Now, the Trouvères created their own image and rolled it along even more. The troubadours and other periods and other entertainers around them started to build the concept that these wonderful lords above them were people of grace and beauty and learned people of gentle hearts, of love. And so what they created was that the Lord in the next, whatever it be, right, kingdom, duchy, whatever, would want to have those values, to be seen as a civilized person. So they would gather about them people, or they would learn Latin, or they would do these many things, or they would start to treat their women with great honour. Now, we've got to realise that for certain periods, in certain cultures in the early medieval period, for example, women were pretty much considered as property for certain areas, right? Taking it the next step and adding love and honour and respect into that meant that that would often change to revered objects of great love, right? So that the whole idea would change. It was a step of civilization. The trouvères and the troubadours and other bardic types would roll that along very nicely. So we had this rolling effect, snowball effect from that period. We can look further back. We can look at the bards, the Celtic bards. The Celtic bards would travel about. If a lord was not good to them, because the tradition in the Celtic bards was that if I was a bard, I would go to a lordly manor of some sort, or a princely manor. It mattered not. It was expected that I would get food, place to sleep, and safety. For that, I would entertain, or I would tell oral histories. The Celtic societies, to a large degree, were illiterate, except for certain particular classes, and all history was told orally. So, you were very good to me, so I would go to the next lordly manor and sing a song of how wonderful you were. If you were dreadful to me, the next I would sing how dreadful you were, I'd tell a story, or leave you out of history. If there was a great battle, you would be left out. You just wouldn't be included, right? So this is where the concept of the graces came in, that it was important. If you wanted to be famous, if you wanted to be known, if you wanted to be seen as something better than your competitor, you couldn't, it went beyond simply squashing them with your troops. We had the subtle arts of entertainment being used as a tool in civilization. This, of course, greatly helped the arts, right? But there's always a reason. The arts have never existed without a reason, right? The Renaissance, we always look at who was the patron of who, right? That could never have happened without that. So the concept that we build up the levels of civilization as a power structure. The knightly class would often add something to their abilities. For example, they would go on crusade, and they would find that in the beautiful courts of the Arabic world, there was, for example, very literate people who were rulers. They were no longer simply warriors, they were something far more than that. The European chivalry, the knightly class, would pull some of that back. They would bring some of that back and add it to themselves. So eventually we brought to a point where the rulers themselves wanted to be part of that artistic class. Okay. We have, for example, many tales told of, for example, Richard the Lionheart was part of and prided himself as part of the great rulers who had the gentle arts. They could entertain, could play, and various things like this. He also had a I was asked earlier. Blondel, thank you. Blondel was his faithful minstrel, who basically followed him everywhere, and they probably were lovers, but who knows. But that was part of the tradition that we had. Okay, we built up later on, and that rolled along. So you basically went through the Renaissance, went through that spreading throughout Europe. You then had how good am I? Right? The chivalries and the other rulers, how clever am I? How worldly am I? How well versed in the arts am I? So no longer, it went well beyond simple power. Okay. So we have people like Henry VIII, who is probably considered the culmination of that style. He was a very, very fine musician. That is not simply the fact that history writes it that way because he was king, so we'll call him wonderful. But he really was. He wrote music, he played, he was very active in those areas. So we have him rolling along. Okay. Now, getting back to power structures and how that affects the people below. If your ruler, the thug above you, that you fear to be a thug, if they display gentle arms, you know that they are more than that. You know that they have depth, they have a soul. You want to encourage that, so you may even write things that encourage that. Again, this is from the Fairfax manuscript, it is Tudor period. Okay. This is Green writing of a king. Enforce yourself as God is knight, to strengthen your commons in their right. Basically, looking at the common people, you must enforce the rights of the common people. Sovereign Lord, in earth most excellent, whom God hath chose our guide to be, with gifts great and evident, of martial power and also high dignity. Sith it is so, therefore it is so. Now let your labour be, enforcing yourself with all your might, to strengthen your commons in their right. God hath give you of his goodness wisdom and strength and sovereignty, all misdone things to redress, and especially hurts of thy commonality. That's what you need to understand. That's redressing the hurts of the common people, right? Which cry and call unto your majesty, in your person all that hope is put, to have recovery of their unright. Okay, so that's basically a person writing in pleading to the king. And the king is represented by all the people below. That's all the lords, all the peerage, all the chivalry. Okay, so you're making an appeal to those people to look after you. Alright, so that's entertainment as a tool, okay, being used as a plea to the people above you. Alright, so within the SCA. We can represent ourselves in the same way. A common person can make a plea to the society as a whole to enforce what they feel are the good virtues of the society. One of it's probably bad form to use an example of my own, but I have a song called the Squire Song. That means a lot to me. That is my plea to the SCA to maintain the values into squires, where squires will become our rulers. And it's a plea to maintain that they maintain the concept of honour and looking after people, and that we have to support them. So that's and I wrote that before I was a peer. So that was a plea to the society, to the people above me, to maintain what I saw as the beautiful values of the society. Okay. Now, why should a knight entertain? A knight should entertain because that is the thing that makes them different from a plain thug. Without that, you would not have a gentler side. Be it whatever. There are many virtues we've discussed. I mean, this is only one of many, but it is one of the tools that any person of power in the society can use to show the common people that they are more than just a wielder of power. They can use it as a form of largesse. I have the ability to give people joy when I sing. I know that. And that I love to do that. And that could be seen, if you wish, as a form of largesse. I like to give that gift. It's wonderful. A knight can use a song or a poem or a tale to show that they wish to give either information, story, even if it's a no shit there I was story. They show that they are not a thug. They are not just a wielder of power. They are a thing of great depth. This is more to do with chivalry and knighthood. So in this hall, I cannot see a knight who has not at least attempted to entertain. Right? All of them have tried. It is part of the expectation, but why is the important thing? not just someone who will step in and wield the power you've been given, that you have depth, you have the ability for largesse, for gentle arts, for any of those things. Questions? Anybody want to throw more in on top of that for a moment? All right, well, yes.
Not only the actual standing up and performing something, but I think there's a performance art to being a ruler. About Prince Princess, there is some art of performance to actually perform in court even. And I think that's another part too.
All right, very well.
I agree. I agree. There's a fair degree of theatre there, but it's not what you call a high level of theatre. It's just enough to make a difference, a discrepancy. And sometimes it's fun to throw it in.
Yeah. Well, each of you who've been Prince or Viceroy or whatever,
who can forget Val and Little Val?
That's right.
Happily.
Dear. Yes, well, sometimes you make mistakes. So, yes, that's for all the people that I've ever seen become Prince or Princess, each of them have started off rather timid. But they've learned the theatre, they've learned to entertain through that. And as they gain in that ability to entertain, who's actually seen, for example, Jay? Who here has actually seen Jay as king? All right, very good. You'll see that Jay carries himself, he is without a doubt a king. He carries himself with great majesty, right? Yes, many of us, having spoken to him and many others, he can also be a real brat. There is no doubt Jay is a brat. But it's sort of one of his strengths. He can be, when he's a brat and a king, he's a boy king. He's a brat boy king, and it's marvellous. He has great theatre. This was, of course, the first time he came out. He was very much but it's marvellous, and that's part of the show that he does. It defines what he is. You know what he is. He's up there, right? If he was just dull, if he did nothing, if he was a little man on a little throne, then there would be no courtly skill with what he does. There would be very little use in him making some great proclamation because it would carry no weight. Right? We talked about franchise earlier. That entertainment perhaps is part of that. You can carry yourself with great authority. You can make a statement which deeply reaches into people if you carry the theatre, the entertainment. How do you learn this? You do it. There is no other way. You simply do it. Stand up, tell a tale. Don't do it in a large crowd if you've never done it before. Do it at a bardic circle. Do it just in front of your own table. Do it for your own people around the campfire. But do it. Learn it. These are the gentle arts that all of us can learn. For example, I involve myself in a little bit of storytelling. I love theatre. I love doing theatre within the SCA. Most of all, I sing. That is what most people have heard me do. That does not necessarily mean you have to sing. If you are not a singer, then so be it. But there are many ways. Recently, juggling has become a very big part of Lochac. It just didn't exist originally, but many people have learned to juggle. That is a courtly skill. It is an entertainment. Other people like to watch you juggle. There is no doubt. All right. How do you find out these things? It's very simple. You find books. Right? For example, Catch. Right. Oh, sorry, Douglas. How far can you follow us?
I've got it.
It's the golf shot. Okay, right.
That one can entertain.
All right. That is a book on medieval legends.